5 little girls. Who's the youngest? You're the youngest? How old are you? 5. Who's next youngest? She's... How old are you? 6. 6. 8? Okay. Are you sisters? Are you and the younger ones sisters? Just friends? How old are you? You're 8. Wow. You're like senior to these other 2 girls. But you're shorter. Yeah, I know. Maybe that's going to change over time. Do you know? It might happen. You might get taller. Okay. And you 5 girls, you know each other? Yeah? Okay. Well, I've been reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, teachings of Lord Kapila, but I don't know how relatable that's going to be for you 5 young girls, what to speak of you. Kapila. Kapila. You've heard the name before? Nope. Nope. Okay. Not sure what to do here. Maybe you just have a different topic besides Lord Kapila. Something that's more easily relatable for young people. Yeah. Well, here's something that may be of interest. It's a story. It's a history of how the Ganges came down into this realm. You want to hear that one? Kapila is involved. One of the Krishna Janmashtami is coming up very soon. Krishna Janmashtami. And when Krishna appeared in the prison house of Kamsa as the son of Vasudeva and Devaki, they offered prayers. First Vasudeva, then Devaki, and then Krishna spoke. When Krishna appeared, he appeared in a 4-armed form. And he didn't appear like a small baby. He appeared in a fully adult size, you could say. Human-like size from the get-go, right from the beginning. And after they offered their prayers, Krishna said, in your previous life, you were Sutapa and Prishni. Sutapa was the husband, and Prishni was the wife. And they did long austerities in worship of Lord Vishnu, and Lord Vishnu appeared before them. And they said, they requested Vishnu, please become like our son, because the Supreme Lord can't be somebody's son. He can be like, and they can have a relationship like parents and son. So he said, Vishnu said, you please me so much that for 3 lifetimes I will appear as your son. And so Krishna is saying all this to Vasudeva and Devaki on Krishna Janmashtami, the day that he appeared at midnight. So I appeared as your son named Prishni Garba. Prishni Garba is the name of the first incarnation as the son of Prishni and Sutapa. And the next Yuga cycle, next Yuga, so that's Satya Yuga. The next one is the same Yuga that Lord Ramachandra appeared. Lord Ramachandra, you all know, right? Lord Ramachandra. Yes? No? Yes. Okay. Lord Ramachandra appeared in the next Yuga, after Satya Yuga, and that's Treta Yuga. And he, Lord Vishnu, said, I appeared as the son of Kashyapa and Aditi, and he appeared as Lord Vamana. Who is Lord Vamana? Vamana is the form of Vishnu who's appeared like a dwarf, like a midget, smaller than you. But he had the powers of Vishnu, and so Vamana came to the place where Bali Maharaj and the priest of the demons were performing a big yajna. And when Vamana appeared, a little small personality carrying the symbols of a Brahmana, very effulgent, as effulgent as another rising sun, very beautiful, very charming. So Bali Maharaj was very happy. Very happy. How auspicious. When you're doing a yajna and a saintly person comes to grace the occasion, then it makes the occasion even more suitable for auspiciousness. Please tell me. I'd like to give in charity, whatever you like. Ask anything at all. So what did Vamana say? I don't need much. I'm a Brahmana. You can give me 3 paces of land. And Bali looked at his short legs. It's 3 paces of land. That's nothing. No, I don't need much. 3 paces of land. So he agreed. Bali agreed. So what did Vamana do? You know the pastime? With his first step, he covered the whole Earth planet. With his second step, he covered all the upper planetary systems and poked his toe through the covering of the universe. And when he poked his toe through the covering of the universe, what happened? The water outside the covering of the universe, the causal ocean, entered into the universe. And that water descended down, 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 because the structure of the universe, according to the Vedic information, there's a hierarchical structure, a vertical structure, and the upper planets were graced by the celestial water, more than celestial water, the water from that washed the feet of Vamana, landed on top of Dhruvaloka. Dhruvaloka, according to Vedic teaching, it's way up there. It's above heaven. It's above the planets of the 7 rishis, etc. So the Ganges descended there. Some time passed. It's still the same Yuga that Ramchandra appeared, which is Treta Yuga, and there was one king in the line of a previous ancestor of Lord Ramachandra. His name was Sagara. Sagara is in that same line. It's the Sun Dynasty. You with me? Sun Dynasty? Lord Ramachandra appeared in the Sun Dynasty, Surya Dynasty. Just like in Bhagavad Gita, we find that Krishna says, chapter 4 Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, long, long ago, I taught this very same Bhagavad Gita knowledge to the sun god, Vivaswan. That's the sun god. Sun god, Vivaswan, had a son. His son's name was Manu, or Vaivasvata Manu. Vaivasvata Manu had a son. His name was Ikshvaku. And in this way, Krishna says, this knowledge was passed on through disciplic succession. Now listen carefully. Manu, Vaivasvata Manu, wanted to establish on earth a kingdom that followed those teachings that Krishna gave to the sun god, and to him, then in turn to him, and then in turn to his son. So he established a kingdom in Ayodhya, and the first king to rule in Ayodhya was Ikshvaku. And in that same line, some generations later, there was another king whose name was Sagara. And Sagara wanted to do some virtuous activity for the benefit of his citizens. So he did what people in that yuga did. He was engaged in a sacrifice. It was a very particular kind of sacrifice where a horse was specially chosen. The horse was then not killed in the sacrifice, but the horse was given a new life. Because a little older, it was to test the power of the Brahmanas. The horse would come out of the sacrifice young. Very good. But as life turns out, there's sometimes problems. I'm sure you found out life has problems. And one of the problems for King Sagara was Indra was jealous. He was nervous. Uh-oh. Maybe he wants to do all these sacrifices so he can take my post, King of Heaven. Indra sometimes gets a little nervous like that. And he does things that aren't very nice. Although he's the King of Heaven, he sometimes does things, even in heaven, sometimes does things that are not nice. So what did he do? He stole the horse. He stole the horse. And he took the horse far, far away. Where did he take the horse? He took the horse to the bottom of the universe. What's at the bottom of the universe? According to the Vedic teachings, there's 7 upper and 7 lower planets. Below the 7 lower is hellish planets. And in that same region is the planet of the forefathers. You've heard of that? Pitris, the Pitri Loka. That's where that is situated, below the 7. So that's where he took the horse. The bottom, Atala or Rasatala, he took the horse there. And who was there but Kapila? Wow. The same one that we were going to speak about, but I thought I should better tell a story instead of just speak the philosophy. Who is Kapila? Kapila is an incarnation of Krishna that engaged in meditation like people do in the Satya Yuga, and he gave teachings. He gave teachings in devotion, and preceding those teachings of devotion was something that's called Sankhya. Sankhya is something that modern science likes. But the original Sankhya came from Kapila, that teaches how to connect with the personality of Godhead by understanding matter is over on this side, spirit is over on this side. We belong to the category of spirit. Meditate on spirit, meditate on the Supreme Spirit, meditate on one's relationship with the Supreme Spirit, engage in devotional service to the Supreme Spirit. It's a sequence. And he gave those teachings. So he's at the bottom of the universe, and Rasatala engaged in meditation. And Indra left the horse by his ashram. Back on the earthly plane, King Sagara was in anxiety. The Brahmanas, who were supposed to perform the yajna, told him, you better find that horse. Because if you don't find the horse, you're going to get a big, bad reaction. It has to be that horse, not just some horse. Because we already, the yajna proceeded to a certain stage. It's got to be that horse. You got to find that horse. You got to find that horse. So King Sagara had a lot of sons. He had 60,000 sons. He sent his sons, go search for that horse. Come back with the horse, whatever you have to do. They searched and searched and searched, and they came back and said, sorry, we couldn't find the horse. He didn't get upset with them, but he said, you got to find that horse. The Brahmin said, it'll be a disaster. Whatever you have to do. Go into lower regions of the world, go in the upper regions, find that horse. So they went and went and went and went, and they reached the place where Kapila was, at the very bottom of the 7 planetary systems, at the bottom of this universe. And they thought, aha, there's the thief, Kapila. He's engaged in meditation, he's not a thief. But they got their weapons and they started to attack him. That was a big mistake. Big mistake. Because from that sin of attempting to harm, what to speak of kill, a Brahmana, instantly their body burst into flames and 60,000 men became a pile of ashes. They found the horse, but they lost their lives by the defense to Kapila. So meanwhile, the king, Sagara, is waiting and waiting and waiting, and his son didn't come back. So he sent he had one other son he couldn't find. The next generation, he couldn't find. The next generation, Bhagiratha, he found. He found the horse. And he had a different mood. He didn't challenge Kapila with folded palms. He offered his prayers to Kapila and made a request. May I have the horse? He said, sure. Take the horse. No problem. And then he said, that the pile of ashes over there, is that my ancestors, the sons of Sagara? He said, yes. What can I do 2 generations later to help the souls that got burnt by their sin? The bodies got burnt. What can I do to help relieve the souls from their reaction of that very bad deed? And Kapila said, very simple, very simple. Their ashes have to be washed in the water of the Ganges. And then they're relieved of that sin. The soul is so many generations later, lifetimes later, souls can be benefited beyond one generation, the next generation, even unknown to them. So what happened next? Bhagiratha went back and reported to the next king. Actually, he was the incumbent king. So he went way, 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 way into the North Country, into the Himalayas. You know where the Himalayas are? No? North of India, there's a really tall mountain range called the Himalayas. Now you know where that is, right? Himalayas? Big mountains, super big mountains. Biggest mountains in the world. So that's where he went, and he did austerities for a long, long time. Long, long time. And what was his purpose in the austerities? He wanted a benediction whereby he could bring the Ganges down to where the ashes of his forefathers were, to relieve the soul of the reaction of their bad deeds. Because that's what Kapila said to do. So Ganga appeared. She said, I can come, but there's a problem. What's that? The force of the power of the descent of the Ganges will crush any place where it falls. So you have to have someone who can retain the force of the descent of the Ganges. So that was Lord Shiva. So long, long, long austerities. Lord Shiva appeared. Lord Shiva, can you help? Sure. And you know the story, in case you didn't know. He caught the Ganges in the hair at the top of his head and held it there, and then gradually released it. So where did the water fall from? Am I still with you? You, at least there's 4 of you left. One is not interested. Okay. The Ganges had fallen to the top of, above the heavenly planets, there's Dhruvaloka. So the Ganges descended from Dhruvaloka to the Saptarishi planets, and from the Saptarishi planets to the heavenly realm, and from the heavenly realm to the earthly realm. And Lord Shiva caught the Ganges in the hair in his head, so it didn't smash the earth planet. And then he released it slowly, and then the Ganges started to flow. Now he, Bhagiratha, wanted to bring the course of the Ganges down to the bottom planet of the universe. So Ganges, the flow of the Ganges was cooperative, and he went and he went and he went. But there was a problem. There's always a problem. You know life that's not a problem? Even if you're Bhagiratha, you got problems. What happened was, the Ganges flowed by the ashram of a great sage, Jahnu Muni, and the Ganges disrupted his ashram. His ashram cup and the whole thing just got flooded over. So what did Jahnu Muni do? He held the Ganges in the palm of his hand and drank it. The Ganges disappeared. Bhagiratha said, Jahnu Muni, help. I want to take the Ganges to the place where Kapila Muni is at the bottom of the universe. Could you release the Ganges so I can direct the Ganges to the bottom of the universe? Said, sure, but it can't come out of my mouth, so I'll make it come out of my ear. I mean, I can't do that, but Jahnu Muni could do that. I can't, you can't drink the whole Ganges either. It came out of his ear. And therefore, one of the names of the Ganges follows the fact that the Ganges came from the ear of Jahnu Muni. And that name, who knows the name? Jahnavi. So Jahnu Muni released the Ganges, and there goes Bhagiratha continuing, leading the course of the Ganges down, 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 down. And finally, the Ganges reached the bottom of the universe. Exactly as what Kapila Dev said. With his permission, the Ganges water washed the ashes of his forefathers, the sons of Sagara, and by that method they became relieved of the sins of having tried to kill and harm Kapila. They were relieved, and now we have the Ganges all the way from the topmost part of the universe, where Vamana poked his toe through the covering of the universe, and the water that washed his feet, that's Charnamrita, fell down and down and down and down. It came through the course of the whole universe. Now there's some details, for those of you that like details. When the water of the Ganges came down to this Bhumandala, this earthly realm, it fell on top of Mount Meru. And there were 4 streams that went in the 4 directions from the top of Mount Meru into this plane of existence where we are. But it's all part of Vedic cosmology. So the branch of the Ganges that went in the northern direction from the top of Mount Meru is the Ganges that we know. But according to the Bhagavatam, there's 3 other large streams of Ganges water entering into this Bhumandala region. I've got a cough, as you can tell. So I'm going to have to break a bit, drink some water. some people really like these Puranic stories. It's a little complicated, but it tells something of the history of how the Ganges came to this realm. And Bhagiratha had a very big part. It was, for the purpose of assisting his great-grandfather, Sagara, who wished to relieve his sons, so Bhagiratha's ancestors, from the bad karma and the reactions of that bad karma. So generations later, we can do. You have to follow Vedic directions, and then it's possible. So there's a system in Vedic culture where one offers prasad of Vishnu to one's forefathers. Pinda, prasad of Vishnu to the forefathers in a certain period of time. Ideal is in a certain place, in Gaya, but otherwise in other places. And I'm going to share with you a little history. Two things. Because of visiting China, I get to find out about, Chinese culture. So one of the things in Chinese culture is there's an annual holiday in China. It's called Tomb Sweeping Festival. And it's a very old tradition, and they still maintain it. Even the atheistic Chinese communist government maintains it. It's an annual festival where you go to where your ancestors may have been buried, and you clean it, and you do some rituals. It's not identical with the Vedic system, nor is the timing identical with the Vedic timing, but it resembles the Vedic culture. And here's another detail. I find it interesting. Maybe you will too. There's a devotee in China who took on the project, kind of like a PhD project, to study the history of religion in China, going back to the Tang Dynasty and, the whole thing, as far back as history of China shows. And one of the things he was looking at specifically was, aside from tradition that is in China, there were attempts made by Christian missionaries, by Buddhist missionaries, and by Hindu missionaries to bring their religion into China. One of them succeeded, and that was Buddhism. But one of the things that Buddhism did that the others didn't do is they just adopted Chinese characteristics, like tomb sweeping. It's not part of Buddhism to worship ancestors. It's not part of Buddhism to worship ancestors. But the Buddhists in China accepted worshiping of ancestors because it fit Chinese culture, and therefore it grafted, and it's still existing today. Whereas the Hindu missionaries, they were a little rigid, and they didn't adapt to Chinese culture, and so it rose for some time. In museums, there's carvings, and there's archaeological record of the presence of Hinduism in China, but it just is artifacts in a museum now, because they didn't accept the Chinese culture and incorporate some of Chinese culture into their teachings. Therefore, it's the lesson to be learned is Krishna consciousness with Chinese characteristics. They have an acronym, KCCC, Krishna consciousness with Chinese characteristics. Why? Because that's what's going to make it sustain. Distributing books and doing Harinam and all those nice things that expand Krishna consciousness, what's going to make it endure is if there's an understanding from qualified people, not just whimsical, but recognizing where there's Chinese characteristics that can be accepted and, connected to Krishna consciousness with Chinese characteristics. It's a challenge because we want to stay faithful to our predecessor acharyas. And then I learned something recently. I was a little surprised. In what state or province is Gaya? Bihar. Where did Buddha appear? Bihar. So there was a branch of Buddhists that were militant. What? Branch of Buddhists that were militant. And what they wanted to do, this particular branch of Buddhists, they wanted to stop with force the rituals of the Hindus because it was misleading people and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they had an attempt to with battle to take away the ritual of offering pinda to the forefathers in Gaya and the lotus feet of Vishnu that are at the top of the hill in Gaya. Now, I don't know much of that detail, just came across it recently, but that didn't help make Buddhism popular in India, the militant group that did like that. And there's other reasons that made them not so popular, particularly Shankaracharya, because Buddha rejected the Vedas. And that wasn't good. So now let's go back to this nice description that some people consider Hindu mythology, the descent of the Ganges being brought by Bhagiratha and Jahnu Muni and the whole thing. Lord Shiva capturing the descent of the Ganges, come crashing down and catching in his hair, no problem. How do you hold the Ganges in your hair? But he's Lord Shiva. He has powers that we don't have. So this is our Vedic understanding, the Puranic history. And what do we know? Or let's say it the other way. What does modern science know? By imperfect senses, what can they know? Perhaps maybe, or not even be honest enough to say perhaps maybe, just say it's like this. And we're supposed to accept it's like this, coming from a person that doesn't really know. And when you challenge the person that doesn't really know, he gets upset. Prabhupada was fond of telling an event that took place at the University of California in Berkeley, where I don't know the name of the gentleman, but a Nobel Prize-winning scientist was speaking at a university in Berkeley. And in the audience was one of the PhD students. He didn't yet have his PhD, but it was Srup Damodar. And he heard this whole presentation, for which he had gotten a Nobel Prize on chemical evolution. So at the end, questions. Srup Damodar raised his hand and said, if I gave you the chemicals, you tell me, stipulate, and I gave you all the chemicals, can you produce life? And the answer, Prabhupada said the answer was, that I cannot say. So theory that doesn't match experiment. Or knowledge of the Vedas that matches elevation of consciousness. And when there's elevation of consciousness, then there can be Svayameva Sparachyada, there can be realizations that are beyond our capacity for realization today, when consciousness is more elevated. Like travel to other planets. We can read about Vedic culture where yogis knew how to travel to other planets. And they didn't need, billions of dollars of budget to get a machine that can fly around. They could fly around. So somebody might say, humbug, and just dismiss it. But as there are material laws that modern science, empiric science, can manipulate material laws and do things that ordinary people are unable to do because they have that knowledge, there's mystic art that it's simply a manipulation of material laws. It's just material laws being manipulated in a subtle way, and such people can do subtle things that worldly people cannot do. So if you're a worldly person, you hear travel to other planets without a rocket ship. Come on. But in previous ages, person's consciousness was far more subtle, far more elevated, and they had access to manipulation of material laws that we don't have access to. And it keeps going down and down and down and down and down. And down and down and down and down and down and down and down. So the quality and character of mankind goes down, and the capacity to understand subtle things, higher consciousness things, it becomes very remote. So how is our present culture to maintain that faith with the younger generation? That they're exposed to, technology. And their brains are wired to technology. And that's advancement. And subtler things, not really so interested. You follow? The one of the main purposes of Srimad Bhagavatam is through sound to cleanse and elevate consciousness. Cleanse of material contact or material contamination, and elevate consciousness. That's restore the original consciousness that's beneath the contamination. And when that becomes part of one's regular activity, consciousness becomes elevated. And then one can start to understand things that one previously couldn't understand, because consciousness previously was covered and dull. So it doesn't mean give up academic and career pursuits and so forth for young people or older generation folks. Doesn't mean that. It means engage in hearing transcendental sound that's from an authoritative source, and it has these two main effects, cleansing and lifting. So you would do well to find ways that your children can engage with you in hearing that sound vibration in a way that's meaningful to them, and they don't get restless like we just experienced. I tried, but restless is going to happen because it's just not interesting for some. But the culture, spiritual culture, is resting upon sound. The sounds that we hear have a profound impact on desire. And the modes of nature are influencing desire, this mode, that mode, the other mode, based upon sound. Why is there so much violence? Sounds. Listen to music. It's so-called, Lord Krishna. It's intense. So what about other. I just got a letter today from a mother whose daughter I've known since she's little girl. She's prepared the last 1 year for, I don't know how to pronounce it, her dance performance for Bharatanatyam dance. For some number of years, 12 years, she's been, in training. And this is it. She's has 8 pieces. And her mother said she's absorbed in trying to enter into the mood, it's culture, trying to enter into the mood of the pastimes which she's trying to portray, and with her dance teacher, knowing how to express those moods through mudras and dance poses and the whole thing. That dance is a cultural performance. And I'm sure, because I know the girl, it's having a profound impact on spiritualizing her consciousness. She's a really good student. She's going to be going to a really good school. That's another thing that's going to happen. Next semester she's going off to college. So, how to prepare your children for doing well in the world, at the same time doing well in their spiritual well-being. That's a challenge, isn't it? From the parent's side and from the kid's side. And there are different ways of going about it, different. But figure out a way that works with your children, and children think of ways that works for you, and connect with those ways. It starts with sound, and a way that the sound connects consciousness with transcendence, or sat. And there's different ways. It can happen in your family. There's a devotee, I think, well, he's a professor. I won't say which college. He's a professor. He has a 7-year-old daughter. And his 7-year-old daughter is really interested in the stories of Ramayana. She does many other things. She's learning kirtan online from some teacher over in Mayapur or something like that. And so he and I were discussing how to help his 7-year-old daughter fulfill this desire to hear Ramayana stories that have some meaning, not just stories. So for practical application. So around and around. So there's some idea that's being floated. So if you know any girls that are 7 years old, and if he says, yes, this plan is a good plan, and then he's going to start it up. And then it's just another opportunity for young people to hear message of transcendence when they're young, in a way that's attractive and interesting, and it goes in, and it stays with them, provided it's interesting and relatable from the presenter. But Ramayana stories are really fun, really attractive. Especially when the person who is speaking understands not only the story, but the meaning behind it, the practical application behind it, how it applies to us in modern times. Because principles don't change over time. Culture may change, the form that things take may change, but principles don't change. And sound vibration has an impact. So I'm making an appeal. In one sense, I'm making an appeal. Parents, give some careful thought, and your children understand you're the future, and for the future well-being of the world, receive and manifest spiritual consciousness, and then live by it as you grow and mature and do your thing in the world. Coming up is Janmashtami, and then after Janmashtami is Radharani's appearance day, and after Radharani's appearance day comes a Purnima, Bhadra Purnima. It's a celebrated time for getting enormous benefits, as described within the Bhagavatam itself, for making a gift of Srimad Bhagavatam to others on that Purnima day. So I've been in kind of churning the topic a little bit. To encourage our communities to receive Srimad Bhagavatam in their home, and then have little reading groups with your community, the people that you're familiar with and comfortable with, and with yourselves and with your children if possible, because Srimad Bhagavatam is very wonderful. And it makes that spiritual impression permanent. And otherwise culture gets lost. And doesn't look good when culture gets lost. So let's see if there's some discussion. And we have our online person in person. Kirti. Anyone would like to discuss some point? Kapila Dev, you have something? Sure. He has a portable microphone so people remote can hear. I'm sorry for my voice, it's like pretty crummy.
So I have a question about the yagyas.
Yeah.
So, two questions that are, I think, related to the same thing about yagyas. So in ancient India, when they performed yagyas, did they sacrifice animals or no? And the other part of the question is, what do Vedas say about yagyas? Are animals being sacrificed or not?
Commonly, the answer to you, it's two questions that are quite similar. Commonly, what Prabhupada would say is the animal wasn't killed. Rather, two things. To test the power of the Brahmanas, they would light the fire, not with Zippo lighters or matches. They would light the fire with mantra to test the power of the Brahmanas' mantra chanting. And the second is, the animal was taken to the sacrifice, enter into the fire, and come out rejuvenated, a young animal of that species. The older horse would come out a young foal to show the power of the Brahmanas. So your question was, commonly that's what Prabhupada answered. They weren't killing animals. They were rejuvenating the lives of older animals. Now, there may have been circumstances where, for example, in Vedic culture, for those who are addicted to meat eating, there was a procedure on the dark moon night to offer a goat to the goddess Kali, and then that animal was killed, and then that by the power of mantra and the power of following the Vedas, the living entity within that goat body in their next life became human, and the person who was engaged, the Brahmana, and the person who wanted the Brahmana to do, they were held responsible for killing. Mamsa, the mantra was saying into the ear of the goat, as I have killed you, you can kill me in your next life. So there's consequences. So there are examples where the animal was killed, and otherwise, at least my understanding, I'm not, an expert at all by any means in karmakanda rituals, but Prabhupada would say consistently, the animal wasn't killed.
Does it apply to all the types of yagyas?
The Ashwamedha Yaga and the Gomedha Yagya in this age are explicitly forbidden because the Brahmanas aren't qualified. But previous ages, there were at least those two, Ashva and Go, horse and cow, and they were rejuvenated, not killed. That's my understanding. I'm not expert in this field.
And one last question. According to Srimad Bhagavad Gita and Vedas, What are the repercussions of killing animals?
What's the repercussion? It's karmic repercussion. You take the life of another entity, and you have the repercussion of killing, murder. So it may be a lower species, it's still murder. And the repercussion is a sinful behavior, and depending upon the accumulation of sinful activities, life, you take life and life is taken. Prabhupada explained that's one of the reasons, not the only, for large-scale wars, because large-scale killing of animals and persons involved in large-scale killing of animals are killed in wars. It's not the only cause of wars, but that's the repercussion. For one who kills is killed.
So our attitude towards animals should be of compassion
Yeah.
and care, right?
Protection.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'll tell a little story. Once upon a time, I became a devotee in this lifetime. And one of the things that became a practice is I had become not just vegetarian, but I was offering my food to Krishna. So when I visited home, I requested my mother, let me cook, and I'd like to have, different pots and just do the cooking myself. And so she was obliging. She was like, didn't understand exactly what's going on, but she was honoring. This is my son's way of doing things. So one time at the dinner table, she asked me, and everybody's at the dinner table, and I'm eating something else than what they're eating. And she said, why are you vegetarian? What's the reason? And I said, according to the Bible, it is said in the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill. And her reply was, in the Bible, it says, God gave dominion over the animals. And I replied, when I was little, you had dominion over me. And she screamed and jumped up from the table and started crying, and my father chastised me severely. Why are you making your mother cry? So I stopped answering questions, because it might trigger, some undesirable emotion. But there's the consequence. You take the life of others. That you're meant to give dominion doesn't mean exploitation. Dominion means you take care of. You have dominion over your family members. That's good. So you take care of them, protect them. And if you don't do that, then you're culpable, depending on the nature of what's done.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
I have a question not related to today.
Okay.
From the first day of Japa retreat,
Hmm.
you gave example of budding devotees, kind of like who came just first day, heard Sankirtan maybe, started crying.
Hmm.
So, like that connection right away happening, is it related to past life?
Yes.
Which was accumulated, but
Yes.
kind of
Yes.
covered with something, and then just
Yes. It's related. That's not the only thing. Another very important thing, is there are spiritual potencies. This is a science, the science of the name. The name appears with Sarup Shakti of Krishna. Krishna is the name, and the name includes his, the fullness of his Sarup Shakti. So when one chants the name, those Sarup Shaktis cleanse and stimulate. Now, some people that doesn't happen to, and some people it does happen to, which is your question. But it's connected to also the Sarup Shakti of the name. Even if one doesn't know, and even if you don't have that experience, that's what's happening. And it's an encouragement. My sense is it's an encouragement from Krishna to have someone go further. I mean, when I gave that example, at least 30 completely unknowing audiences sharing that same experience. What was that? kind of question. So yes, something previous, but also some encouragement. It's in Nectar of Devotion, it's called Abbas. Nam Abbas, a shadow. It's not the fullness of the ecstasy of being in a relationship with Krishna and Krishna revealing everything. It's a shadow. But even the shadow is like amazing. An experience that we would like to have all the time, feeling great joy within. And it faded, went away. Who knows what those 30 people happened after that. But some encouragement for sure.
Thank you much.
Does your son have a question? No? Okay.
So you mentioned that in China, the region that followed their practices kind of worked, and as you preach a lot in China, so what are the things which kind of working in terms of spreading Krishna consciousness there?
I don't understand your question. Be simple. What's your question?
So basically, when we are preaching in what are their practices that we are kind of trying to follow, or basically take assistance of, so that they could correlate Krishna consciousness more?
Music, dance, art. In China, it's very common. Dance. Coming home from evening programs, many times. Over there is a park. And in the park, there's hundreds of people with spotlights so they can do their thing. And they're playing some Chinese music, and they're dancing. It's part of their culture, music and dancing. So they connect the Hare Krishna Kirtan with music and dancing. It's a natural fit. And then they experience something that's different than what they experience when they do that other dancing, etc. And art forms, food. Then they can understand the difference, and even by taste and experience, the difference between taking Krishna Prasadam and just eating. So you connect to something that they do, families, family care. You just connect to Krishna consciousness.
Universal things, basically.
What?
Those are universal things, basically.
What?
Universal things that everybody like.
Yeah. Everybody eats. Everybody's music is popular everywhere. So make a connection that works. Okay.
Namaste, Maharaji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. You mentioned that it is important to encourage the kids at early age and to involve them in Krishna consciousness at early age. You also mentioned that sound makes great impact.
Yes.
So is it that you were saying, you were referring to, related to Japa basically, Om Ram Krishna Hari and Bhajan, so that...
Well, in addition to name, there's in general Katha, Hari Katha, Bhagavad Katha, Ram Katha, Krishna Katha, Katha. So you can take that to mean stories, or you can take it to mean teachings, teachings, sambandha, gyan, teachings, and help through sound. And if it's presented in a way that's meaningful, and the younger person can relate to the relationship with the older person, and that it's interesting and fun, and they're learning, because young people like to learn, and so it can be a combination of different things. But so in addition to by sound, it's the Ramayana and Mahabharata and Bhagavatam, and stories that are presented in such a way that it's not just hearing a story and learning the details of the story, but understanding how it applies. And that's a good teacher, or a good parent, or a good friend. Someone else? Yes? Over here?
So when you were discussing about the animal sacrifice and how people used to sacrifice the animals, what yuga was all that happening in?
The previous 3 yugas, is particularly in Treta Yuga. Treta Yuga is the yuga where the sacrifices come. So we'll go down from there's the Satya Yuga, meditation. Treta Yuga, next one, sacrifice. Next one, Dwapara Yuga, temple worship. Kali Yuga, kirtan. So especially, but it's not exclusive to the second of the 4 yugas, Treta Yuga. Very common. Very common. Forbidden in Kali Yuga because, according to scripture, the Brahmanas aren't qualified to do that yajna in such a way that the real purpose is fulfilled. Doesn't mean it doesn't go on. It goes on. In some places it goes on. But it's not, by scripture, it's not to be performed in this age. Okay? In the back.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Sorry, I lost my voice. Morning you were talking about Chitraketu Maharaj, and now you spoke about Bhagiratha, and as I hear the 2 pastimes.
Could you speak directly into the microphone? I don't have to repeat it, I heard.
As I think about the 2 pastimes of these 2 personalities, in the case of Chitraketu Maharaj, you mentioned in the morning that it was not kind of meant to be that he get a son, although he endured a lot with many wives. On the other side, we see here Bhagiratha and even his forefathers, many of them tried to bring Mother Ganges down from heavenly planets.
I'm listening.
They succeeded, but eventually Bhagiratha succeeded. None of his forefathers succeeded. So my question is, at what point does one say that it's not meant to be, or I should continue enduring? There is.
In the case of Bhagiratha, and in the case of you, if there's superior authority saying to do something, you continue. Even if the result isn't coming, you continue because the instruction is there to do.
Thank you.
And Chitraketu didn't have such an instruction. He was just attached. And the obvious was obvious to everyone except him. It wasn't meant to be.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that's it for the evening. You have something online? Okay. Sorry.
Question from Sanchari. One of the things I have noticed is that once someone tastes spiritual life or even understands the reality of material life, it is difficult to go back to material life or live it in the way it was lived before. I have seen this in friends who have quote-unquote left spiritual life. Somehow or another, they come back. There are also stories where devotees, by the mercy of their spiritual master or Krishna, have remembered Krishna at the time of death, or somehow arrangements were made for devotees to be there at the same token. There are devotees who have stayed true to their spiritual life, who have left their bodies in unfortunate circumstances. Can you please comment on this, specifically in how we can explain the
Particularly how?
Specifically on how we can explain the seeming difference in mercy to those who are disturbed by it.
Those who are?
Disturbed.
My answer to a question like this is it depends on the person you're speaking to. Some principles can be mentioned, but how you convey those principles depends on the person. For example, if there's a long-standing tendency towards sincere, steadfast shelter-taking, then Krishna will help that. On the other hand, if there's a tendency for, on and off, intermittent, warm and cold, then that's also recognized by Krishna. And so there's reciprocation from the other side, and circumstances unfold according to the reciprocation from Krishna's side with our sankalpa, our intention to do whatever it is our intention is. The whole of reality is there's a relationship between us and the source of everything, and the source of everything is all-knowing and takes into account our regard for him, and according to our regard for him, he reciprocates.
Can the Webb telescope capture images of Goloka Vrindavan or the heavenly planets? Or is it limited to the material world and / universe?
Oh, it's definitely limited. Extending the senses is limited as the senses are limited. Purified senses is another category. Then one can perceive spiritual, but not by, a sophisticated material instrument. Okay? Anything else? One more.
How does Upasana Kanda take one to be one with the Supreme? This is mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.2.
For our audience here in the room, you may not understand what the question is. Let me say back what I think the question is. There's a reference in 1.1.2 of Bhagavatam in the purport about upasana, which means worship, and there are those who wish to worship with the idea of becoming one with the object of worship. There are others who worship with the idea of pleasing the object of worship. So the consciousness behind the worship makes all the difference between the outcome. And even the idea of oneness can be impersonal or personal. The worship where the object is personal, I wish to have my desire the same as the desire of the object of worship. There's a oneness, but there's also the worshipper and the worshipful. So simultaneous, one and different. That's our bhakti teachings. Then some persons don't have bhakti teachings. They literally want to become one with the object. And the medium is worship. Okay. Yeah.
Said now that,
A microphone.
you just said that to become one in the worship. Just mentioned.
Yes.
To become one and to become impersonal.
There are different ideas of what that means.
I mean, worship, isn't it based on duality?
Based on
Duality.
duality. Well, let's do three things. There's duality, there's oneness, and there's simultaneous oneness and difference. And that's the teaching of Lord Chaitanya. The oneness is oneness of love, and there's a difference of the worshiper and the worshipful difference. The tiny and the infinite, the subordinate and the infallible unlimited. So there's a difference, but the oneness can be the oneness of love, where the desire of the beloved becomes my desire. That kind of oneness. The purpose of my existence is the purpose of the beloved. That's love. That kind of oneness. While there's difference. How's that? Okay. Looks like we're done. Thank you very much. Sorry for my cough. Hopefully it'll go away.